A dying ape in a freezing Bavarian would swallowed a mouthful of fermented wild figs, and a broken enzyme permanently rewired its brain to turn raw sugar into lethal visceral fat. Today, that exact same survival switch is triggered 24 hours a day inside every brightly lit aisle of your local supermarket, killing 35 million humans every single year. How did a 15-million-year-old genetic miracle, designed to save us from winter starvation, get hijacked into the deadliest invisible weapon in the modern supermarket? A corrupt scientific trial funded by brown envelopes in Harvard offices. A hidden chemical switch inside your liver that deliberately disables your full signal. And one arrogant researcher who buried data from 15 sovereign nations to conceal the truth. To understand why you reach for a sugary snack at midnight, you must go back 15 million years to the middle Miocene transition. The Earth was cooling rapidly. Massive ice sheets locked up moisture, collapsing Europe's tropical fruit forests into barren scrubland. Our early primate ancestors, known as Dryopithecus, faced absolute, imminent extinction. Food disappeared for 8 months out of every year. Most ape species starved to death. But then, a single genetic error altered the fate of human history forever. A point mutation silenced the uricase gene. Uricase was the ancient enzyme responsible for breaking down uric acid. Without uricase, every molecule of fructose from wild autumn figs generated a massive spike of uric acid inside liver cells. That uric acid forced the mitochondria to shut down fatty acid oxidation and convert every available calorie straight into subcutaneous and visceral fat. Why did this matter so desperately? Because ordinary glucose fuels your muscle tissues, but fructose acts as an immediate biological instruction to pack on fat. When you eat glucose, your pancreas releases insulin, which eventually signals satiety to your hypothalamus. Fructose bypasses insulin secretion entirely. It enters liver cells through GLUT5 transporters without triggering leptin, the master hormone that tells your brain you are full. That single corrupt letter in its genome silenced the enzyme that burned off fructose. To our starving ancestors, this missing brake pedal was an evolutionary jackpot. It allowed them to gorge on thousands of fruit berries without feeling stuffed. The mutant apes grew thick layers of belly fat in late September, survived the brutal 6-month freezing winter, and passed that exact mutated gene down to you. Do you ever wonder why you can finish an entire 32-ounce soda after a full meal and still feel like eating more? It is not a lack of moral willpower. Your brain genuinely believes winter is coming and that the fruit tree will be bare by morning. For millions of years, fruit was extremely rare, seasonal, and packed with fiber that slowed absorption to a trickle. An ancient ape would consume barely 2 grams of natural fructose per day during a brief 3-week summer window. Fast forward to 2024. The average adult in Western nations consumes 55 grams of pure, unbound industrial fructose every single day. That is a 2,600% surge in a biological signal designed to prepare your organs for a famine that never arrives. By November, that broken gene was the only reason 4 extra pounds of fat sat locked around its waist, and it was about to lie to its brain. If fructose is so biologically destructive, how did it end up hidden inside 80% of processed foods on grocery shelves? If you want to understand how this ancient survival mechanism was turned against us, Human Code unpacks these deep human mysteries every single week. The answer begins with a middle-aged physiologist from Minnesota whose explosive personal feud reshaped global public policy. His name was Ancel. Brash, hyper-ambitious, and utterly intolerant of scientific dissent. In September 1955, top medical minds gathered at a World Health Organization symposium in Geneva, Switzerland, to confront a terrifying surge in heart attacks. Keyes stood up and presented a simple graph. 6 nations showing a perfect line connecting saturated fat consumption to heart disease deaths. It looked like ironclad proof. Dietary fat was clogging arteries like rust in a pipe. Then, a prominent doctor named Sir John Yudkin stood up in the Geneva auditorium and destroyed Keyes' argument in 2 minutes. Yudkin showed that if you plotted dietary sugar intake instead of fat, the correlation with heart deaths was vastly stronger. Keyes was publicly humiliated. He returned to Minnesota furious, obsessed with obliterating Yudkin's career and proving himself right at any cost. In 1970, Keyes published his magnum opus, the famous 7-country study, analyzing 12,000 men across the globe. It appeared to definitively confirm that saturated fat was the sole culprit behind cardiovascular disease. What the public never saw was that Keyes had data from 22 countries sitting in his filing cabinet. He intentionally excluded 15 nations, including France, West Germany, and Switzerland, where people ate massive quantities of butter and fat, yet had exceptionally low heart attacks. If Keyes had included all 22 countries, the correlation between fat and heart disease completely vanished. Keyes didn't just cherry-pick data. He actively smeared John Yudkin, branding him a fraud and pressuring journals to reject his anti-sugar papers. Yudkin was unceremoniously pushed out of his university chair, his reputation ruined, while Keyes secured the cover of Time magazine. While Keyes was fighting his ideological war against fat, the commercial sugar industry realized it needed a powerful scientific counteroffensive. In 1965, executives at the Sugar Research Foundation met in secret in Boston, Massachusetts. They launched a covert operation designated Project 226. The Sugar Research Foundation secretly paid 3 top Harvard scientists, Dr. Mark Hegsted, Dr. Robert McGandy, and Frederick Stair, the equivalent of $50,000 in today's currency. In exchange, the Harvard scientists published a fraudulent literature review in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1967. The paper intentionally selected flawed studies to exonerate sugar while blaming saturated fat for every clogged artery in North America. The sugar industry executives personally edited the drafts prior to publication. The financial connection was never disclosed to the medical community. This corrupt review became the cornerstone of federal nutrition guidelines for the next 40 years. In 1977, the U.S. Senate Select Committee, led by Senator George McGovern, issued the first official dietary goals for the United States. The head author hired to draft those government guidelines was Dr. Mark Hegsted, the exact same Harvard scientist bribed by the sugar industry. The McGovern report instructed all citizens to slash fat intake from 40% to 30% of daily calories. The outcome was immediate and catastrophic. Food companies yanked fat out of yogurt, salad dressings, sauces, and bread. When you remove fat from food, it tastes like cardboard. To make low-fat processed food palatable, food engineers needed a cheap substitute. And in 1967, a massive industrial breakthrough in Clinton, Iowa, provided the perfect weapon. Japanese researchers developed an enzymatic process using xylose isomerase to convert cheap corn starch into high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup was 70% cheaper than cane sugar, liquid at room temperature, and exponentially sweeter. The industry flooded every consumer product with this cheap liquid sweetener, weaponizing our 15-million-year-old mutation on a mass scale. When a reveal this massive clicks into place, human code releases new evidence breakdowns every week. Subscribing ensures you never miss a deep dive. By 1982, American per capita high fructose corn syrup intake rocketed from 0 to 27 pounds a year. What happened to the health of everyday citizens who followed these government guidelines to the letter?
Consider the cost paid by millions of trusting patients who trusted the lower-fat mandate.
This tragic outcome was not an accident. It was the direct metabolic consequence of replacing natural fats with liquid fructose. To understand why fructose causes metabolic destruction, look at how your liver processes different sugars. When you eat 120 calories of glucose from a potato, 80% is absorbed by your brain, muscles, and heart. Only 20 calories hit your liver. When you drink 120 calories of liquid fructose from a soda, 100% rushes straight into your liver. The enzyme fructokinase metabolizes fructose without any rate-limiting control, rapidly depleting ATP energy reserves inside liver cells. Because modern liquid sugar bypasses the body's energy-sensing network entirely, your brain literally believes it is starving to death even as you consume thousands of calories. This cellular energy drop tricks the liver into sending starvation signals to the brain, igniting intense, uncontrollable sugar cravings. It converts the excess fructose straight into de novo lipogenesis, building toxic liver fat and triggering non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Before 1980, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease was virtually non-existent in medical textbooks. Today, it affects nearly 1 in 3 adults globally. If sugar is so unnatural and deadly, why does a newborn baby instinctively smile the first time they taste it? Because in nature, sweetness was evolution's guarantee that a plant was non-poisonous and calorie-dense. What if the global obesity epidemic isn't a failure of willpower, but a sign that your biology is working exactly as designed? Your ancient survival machinery is running Miocene software inside a 21st century hyper-processed matrix. Look at what happens to laboratory rats when given free access to liquid fructose alongside standard rat chow. They ignore nutritious food, drink fructose constantly, develop severe metabolic syndrome, and display brain changes identical to cocaine addiction. When food engineers formulate modern snacks, they calculate the precise ratio of sugar, fat, and salt known as the bliss point. The bliss point maximizes dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens without triggering satiety signals in the stomach. They engineered ultra-processed products to overcome the natural chewing resistance of real food, allowing you to swallow hundreds of calories in seconds. Consider liquid calories. Liquid sugar passes into the duodenum faster than solid food can ever be broken down. Because there is zero fiber matrix to slow digestion, your gut microbiome never receives the signal to release PYY and GLP-1 fullness hormones. Your body absorbs 100% of the fructose payload instantly, driving an explosive surge in liver uric acid. That spike in uric acid directly inhibits nitric oxide production in your blood vessels, driving up systemic blood pressure within minutes. This is why chronic sugar intake is now recognized as the primary underlying cause of essential hypertension, far outstripping dietary salt. Yet for decades, government panels urged citizens to avoid salt shakers while ignoring soda fountains. And what became of John Yudkin, the prophet who warned the world about sugar in 1972? He died in relative obscurity in 1995. His books long pulled from university libraries. Only in 2015, when secret documents from Project 226 were unsealed by researchers at the University of California, was Yudkin completely vindicated. By then, 3 generations had suffered from rampant diabetes, obesity, and heart disease triggered by the low-fat deception. Today, 68 pounds of added sugar slip into your digestive system each year, disguised under 56 different technical chemical names. Names like maltodextrin, crystalline fructose, dextrose, evaporated cane juice, and agave nectar. They exist for one single purpose: to obscure the total fructose load from conscious awareness while keeping your ancestral survival switch permanently turned on. Tonight, When you stand in front of your refrigerator at 11:42 p.m., feeling an intense craving for something sweet, understand what is really happening. You are not broken, and you don't lack willpower. You are simply a perfectly engineered prehistoric survivor, trapped in a modern world where the winter famine never comes. You close the fridge door, step back into the dark, and swallow a 15-million-year-old starving ape trapped inside a modern kitchen. If you want to decode the ancient biological code that secretly dictates your choices every single day, subscribe to Human Code right now.